obviously, we need to know the law as lawyers, but we really need to step back and think how that impacts on you as for example, a tutoring business, and to kind of say that I can spout forever about what the law says, but actually what I might be saying might be looking to drive a double-decker bus through your business. Compliance, you can look at it and it can be really difficult, but looking at things that actually it's a way of enhancing your business. I spoke to a tutor just a few days ago, and she was saying that she was really worried about these sort of changes that are forthcoming. And in her head, she'd blown it up and up and up. And it was something that was basically she was going to shut the door on her business, which would have been devastating because she's a brilliant tutor. And to think that somebody might have been led to that it makes me want to weep, quite frankly.
Hello and welcome to the Qualified Tutor Podcast, the podcast that brings you the latest in the world of tutoring, edtech and education, and hopefully inspires in you the big change that each and every one of us is capable of. Qualified Tutor is an industry-leading tutor training organisation and online tutoring community for thousands of tutors around the world. This podcast is the voice of this community, where we aim to hear from tutors, teachers, entrepreneurs, coaches, business experts, students, tutorpreneurs, and more from the world of tutoring about what inspires them every day, how they can help tutors like you, and what they've learnt about tutoring along the way. The question is, what will you learn today? Hello and welcome to the 140th episode of the Qualified Tutor Podcast. My name is Ludo Miller, the host of this podcast. Welcome back to our regular listeners. Welcome to any of you for whom this is your first time listening to the Qualified Tutor Podcast. And a very, very warm welcome to our guest today, Steph Barber. Welcome to the podcast, Steph.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me.
It was something we felt we had to, Steph. You have played such a key role in the lives of tutors and tutoring companies here in the UK for a very, very long time, but principally in the last kind of 12 months or so, 9 months or so. And if you don't know what we're talking about, listeners, you will do by the end of the next half an hour or so. So, Steph, as a little background to Steph, as I always do on this podcast, so that listeners know where we're coming from and where the conversation is coming from today. Steph completed her legal training here in the UK before setting up, I believe it was your own commercial and medical negligence firm. Is that right, Steph?
That's right. Yes, it was. Yes, yeah. Very traditional practice at that time.
Yeah, and then this was sold in 2000, wasn't it? And then in 2009, you started Law Hound alongside your co-founder Sue Edwards, and really this has allowed you to improve and kind of develop the range of online legal services that, of course, Law Hound offer, but also that are available to the UK market, and particularly over the last few years, education and the tutoring market. And off the back of the new tutoring legislation that came out in 2001, Law Hound you've really consolidated your education practice and have helped a huge number of tutoring companies, as I said, stay compliant, navigate a route through the turbulence, as it were. So I speak for most of the industry when I say more of the same, please, Steph and Sue, for this wonderful help you're doing. And of course, you were just mentioning that you're now launching a series of courses that tutors and tutoring companies leaders can take to understand this legislation a little bit better. So that's a really exciting development, of course, for our community as well, because we run our own courses. So that's something that our community understands very, very well. So, Steph, welcome to the podcast. Today is Tuesday, the 15th of November. What is giving you reason to smile today, Steph?
being here, of course, but actually helping people. It genuinely makes me feel, and Sue, she's my best friend as well as someone I'm in business with, incidentally, but genuinely knowing that you've made a difference. Believe it or not, that's probably the reason that I went into the law. And I have to smile now, because I think no sooner did I get there that I realised that actually it wasn't all quite like that. You realise that the helping bit is the bit that you have to forge for yourself, because it's kind of obviously following the law. But it became sort of form-filling. We did quite a lot of legal aid work. So it is genuinely, when I hear that somebody has benefited from something that I do, I think, great, I have hit that spot that I wanted to.
What a lovely summation of what it is to be happy in business and in your personal life, Steph. Do you think that was something that was always kind of inside you, that fire in your belly, and that helping people and knowing that you have helped them?
Yes, absolutely. And Sue, as I said, feels exactly the same way, because we actually started off life in rival practices, and we literally were. I mean, we absolutely fought, obviously within the legal forum, I have to say, absolutely fought together, and we would virtually rip each other apart in the mental sense. And we both felt the same way, and we both realised that actually the law at that point was stuck at a point that it wasn't giving people what they actually wanted. Yes, there were the constraints of legal aid, but looking at it from a business's point of view, nobody wants a lawyer that can say, actually, no, let me tell you about regulation 2 of blah, blah, blah. You, as a business owner, want to know, how does this affect me? What can I do? How can I deal with it? And I felt, and so did Sue at that point, that the law wasn't actually giving people what they wanted. So nobody wants to know what I know. You want to know how it impacts on you.
Now, in a similar way, Steph, often a student doesn't feel, at school doesn't feel like they need to know exactly how to get there and what, name of this and name of that. They just want to know, what do I need to know to progress, to gather knowledge. Now, regular listeners will know that I like to dial back the years in these podcasts at the start of the episode and explore a little bit about our guests' school days. Now, as I know is difficult for people to do, to locate old school reports, I do ask every guest every time, and there are varying degrees of success. That maybe wasn't possible this time around, but you do have a little tale about the role and the importance of a tutor. Is that right?
I do, yes, absolutely. And it has impacted on me in a number of ways. If you'll indulge me, I'll tell you what it was. At the point, and it was only a few years ago because I'm so very young, but at the point, whatever the career paths I was looking at, it was definitely a university degree course that I had to go on. And at that point, it was much more inflexible. I had to get certain examinations, and that included then a maths O-level. Say it quickly so nobody can be guessing my age. But I had to get it, and it was an absolute, if you don't get this, you are really not going to be going anywhere. And maths was definitely not my strong subject by a long, long way. It wasn't, I think actually probably looking at it, perhaps it was dyscalculia or something like that. But I could understand what we were doing, but my answer would be way out. And I had a teacher who obviously saw something in me. And she was absolutely amazing. And she sat and she worked with me. And she helped me kind of look at the things that I could do really easily. And that, for me, was kind of those problem-solving questions. I'm not sure whether they have them now, but it might be, you're traveling around the globe and you're doing this, that, and the other, you're calculating distances. Because I understood how to get that, but my answer, as I say, would be incorrect. So she spent hours with me doing that. And I can't honestly say it gave me a love of maths, but it gave me a real understanding of how to tackle problems. I did get my O-level, And I stood back and yes, I did get in to do a degree and everything, and hence why I'm here today. But it gave me an understanding of a couple of things. Number one is kind of she saw something in me that I think another tutor would have easily given up on. Number two, she understood the importance of why I needed to get that particular qualification. And she spent the time in finding and helping me achieve that. And I guess from that, I was saying earlier on, wasn't I, that I wanted to help people. And that kind of cemented how important it was to actually find what somebody wants and try and support them and give that to them. So I can honestly say, if it hadn't been for that maths teacher, I really wouldn't have been sitting here today, or I would have been, but in a completely different capacity.
On the other side of the microphone, perhaps. Yeah. It's, you won't believe how many times that story is borne out by guests about a particular teacher. And maybe the truth is that over the years that, we actually forget those other teachers who helped. Maybe not. Maybe it is that there is often just this one teacher who inspires learning. And that is such a rallying call for tutors and educators out there, teachers who, knowing that could be you. So a lovely tale there, Steph. I think that's really a really striking place to hold this conversation from.
Thank you.
Now, we often ask as well this question about our guests' why, and what that means to them and how they think it might have led them to be where they are today. And you've just touched on there a bit about how this tutor helped you to the extent that it would have changed the course of where you are today. Yeah. Could you tell us a little bit more about your why and how you've got to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, it's as I touched on, it really was about helping people. But it's more about sort of recognizing that the law needs to give people what they need to reach their own goals. Just as I got that maths to help, I need to be doing the same for clients. So, for example, touching on something like compliance, obviously we need to know the law as lawyers, but we really need to step back and think how that impacts on you as for example, a tutoring business, and to kind of say that I can spout forever about what the law says, but actually what I might be saying might be looking to drive a double-decker bus through your business, because you have to, thinking about the recent changes, you have to do things differently. And it's about kind of understanding the impact on the client or the person that's going to be receiving the knowledge, and making sure it is actually what they want, and it's delivered in a way that they can take it away and think, yeah, gosh, I was glad I did that. I'm glad I spoke to her, or I'm glad I had a look at that training package document. It's moved me on. It's achieved what I wanted to achieve.
And that's what you find in your conversations with tutors and tutoring companies, is it?
It is, yeah. I mean, I spoke to a tutor just a few days ago, and she was saying that she was really worried about these sort of changes that are forthcoming. And in her head, she'd blown it up and up and up. And it was something that was basically, she was going to shut the door on her business, which would have been devastating, because she's a brilliant tutor. And to think that somebody might have been led to that, it makes me want to weep, quite frankly. And, she realised that she didn't need to kind of throw her business in the bin and start again. She needed to tweak. She needed to make a few minor changes which fitted in with how she could work. And what she has actually found is spending the time on her business has actually helped her grow and enhance her business. So, win-win all round, really.
Yes, exactly. Snatching victory from the jaws of defeat, perhaps. So you've given a little insight there, but just so our listeners can understand and see where you fit into the equation, can you tell us how you support tutoring companies?
Of course, yes. I mean, in a number of ways. We offer kind of starting obviously very mindful for costs, starting off with offering a range of documents. Quite often we call them toolkits or hubs, which have the essentials in that you need with some underpinning knowledge so you understand why you're doing it, and then kind of walk through videos that might take you through a document. So, for example, let's say it's a cookie policy that you need for your website. You'll understand when you've finished our program, you'll understand what a cookie policy is, why you need one, how it can be important to your business. And then you'll also be presented with the final document, which has kind of got choices and options, which we talk you through. And that's one of the main things that we're offering at the moment. But we also kind of offer sort of consultancy, and we like to put on webinars, Q&As, that sort of thing. And we like to sort of put on, offer sort of people blogs and the ability to get some free information as well, because that can be a really important starting point. Going back to basics and thinking, what do I have to do and how am I going to actually achieve this?
Yeah, so a range of options really there for how you support. Yeah, I think that's crucial, isn't it? Because not every agency will have a different way of approaching this, and will have a different system for how they run things or systems. So I love that idea of being flexible and being open and having those free resources as well. Because obviously the commercial side of the law for businesses is a very well established part of the legal industry, but for tutoring companies, understanding where they fit into national legislation, that kind of thing, that can be quite new, and the threat of perhaps being on the wrong side of law is not something that lots of people who set up their own small tutoring business will have thought about before. With thanks to our sponsors this week, Newman Tuition and their founder Zach Newman.
Hi, this is Zach from Newman Tuition. Educating young people and helping them to fulfill their potential is one of life's great joys. If you are a high caliber individual who shares our passion for teaching, then we would like to hear from you. We are committed to gathering together tutors who have strong academic records, an enthusiasm for teaching, and excellent interpersonal skills. This is why we seek only the best tutors to join our network, and why we are recommended by the Good Schools Guide. To join our team or to find out more, please visit newmantuition.co.uk.
So what do you see as some of the biggest challenges then for compliance with regard to a tutoring company, tutoring agency?
This might sound awful, but actually it's sometimes the business owner or the tutor or the agency themselves, because I think the law isn't very good at giving you kind of a nice little snapshot or a checklist of what you need to do. It tends to still work on the fear factor. If you don't do this, you will be inspected and you will be fined and you will be, etc. So it's not a really sort of not a good relationship to start with, to some extent. So I think that if imagining myself as a tutor, I think, God, I don't know where to start. I'm frightened of getting this wrong. It's going to take so long to do. And I think you almost kind of make yourself so static that you end up doing nothing, or you do it's not till the end of December. Put it off, a few more weeks, looking at the calendar. Oh my goodness, I've got to be compliant today. So I think that sometimes it is that attitude, and I fully understand why, incidentally. It's certainly not a criticism. It's because the law isn't very user-friendly. And when you have a look at the so-called kind of help books that some of the government agencies put out, they are intended to be helpful, but they actually make you want to weep. They make me want to weep. And obviously I've read lots and lots of legal documents, legislation, etc. So you'll know exactly what I mean. So I think that it can be, and also focusing on this is something I have got to do. It's imposed on me. I must do it. And that's the attitude I'm going to take, almost kind of, don't want to do this. Somebody's making me do it. And I really, really hate this. And It is difficult, but I think if you can say, actually, you know, I work hard in my business. I probably spend less time than I want to, or I'd like to, or perhaps I should, in looking at my business, reviewing my processes, etc. So kind of looking at it in a more positive way. This is a way which actually, if I do these tweaks and somebody helps me through this, I can end up with kind of offering a better service to my clients, to my students. I can end up with maybe processes that are just going to make things easier for me. So those, I think, are the main issues.
Those, I think you've accurately described the current psyche of lots of tutoring company leaders. And exactly as you say, it's not criticism of them. It's something that they won't have encountered before. And it's something that, you know, in the grand scheme of things has happened quite quickly. You know, 2021, yes. New legislation, suddenly by the end of 2022, that things have to be in place. And of course, for our non-UK listeners here, you may have certain or equivalent legislation either already in force or coming into force in your own jurisdiction, in your own country. I think what is happening in the UK at the moment is a really good example of the kind of ways that governments might view the tutoring industry. I know that in Egypt recently there has been legislation that's come in requiring all tutors and tuition centres to hold a license in order to tutor. So that's a kind of similar way that the government is looking to regulate some of the activities happening. So this episode is obviously focusing a little bit on the UK tax situation, but I think some of these things are really very applicable elsewhere. So you've laid out some of the issues, Steph. What are some of the ways that you are helping tutoring companies to find solutions to those issues?
I think by taking away that kind of almost self-imposed fear factor, by kind of realizing when you start to break it down, what you've got in place may not be exactly right, but you know what? In most times, it's just you need a few tweaks. You need to have a look at what you're doing, have a look at what you need to do, and make some little changes. It's not kind of, I've got to throw my business in the bin and start again. It really isn't. And it's probably having a process and formalising something which you do anyway. So, for example, as a tutor agency, you've got a way of choosing tutors. You know, you don't just stick your finger in the air and think, "Oh, that one, I'll have that tutor with this student." It's so much more than that. There's a magic that happens from the agency's point of view. It can be hard to try and explain why you do it and what you do, but actually, you can probably get it down to a couple of sentences and maybe a very quick checkbox, and that's something that's easy. And just sort of, you know, being aware and being ready to accept and embrace the change, and working through kind of the documents. I know that somebody who's recently done one of our work that said that, you know, I virtually sort of said, I put aside weeks for this, and it took her 4.5 hours, and she'd done everything that she needed to be compliant. Absolute win, because she went in there with, I'm going to do that attitude, and I will get that done. And the magic happened for her.
And the same can be the same for you, listening out there. If you think this is going to take you from now until December the 31st, then it's not necessarily like that. It doesn't have to ruin your Christmas if that's something that you celebrate between now and then. So yeah, I really love that angle. You know, obviously, listening to a podcast like this or a piece of media or resource like this will go a long way to helping you understand what needs to be done. But yeah, just there's one more topic I'd like to focus on here, because we've talked mostly here about tutoring companies and tutoring company leaders. But of course, the changes that are being brought in, which we haven't gone into great detail exactly here, and I think that's very deliberate. And that's something to discover in your own time if that's something you don't know about or you'd like to find out more about. But there is also this key part of how you hire individual tutors. So, of course, that is important for the tutoring company leader to know what kind of structures and models you need to employ people on. But what do individual tutors need to know now about working for a UK-based tutoring agency?
I think probably to the many tutors I've spoken is accepting that, of course, you're a tutor, you're there to impart your knowledge, but actually you are running a business, even if it's only a small or micro business. And as a business person, you can ignore what you have to do. For example, perhaps registration for self-employment, because most tutors, I believe, are going to be kind of freelancers or self-employed. You can ignore that as a tutor, or you can embrace it and make it really work for you and enhance your experience. So things like, cancellations, students, how are you going to deal with all of that? Have it in your mind. Take this opportunity, what's working for you. Discuss that with the agencies. And it's going to make for a really good working relationship. Because if you look at it as a business, as a tutor, and the tutor agency is looking at it as a business, you're all working towards the same goal, which is giving the best service. And if you go at it that way, then it seems from what I've seen that it's really going to work for both the tutors and the tutor agencies.
And that's such a key point to note for this, isn't it? Is that, while this scary looking tax legislation comes in from, the Department for the BAIS, the government department here in the UK, the aim here is not to wipe out tutoring. The aim here is to improve the sector and make sure that everyone understands the professional and commercial implications of being a tutor. And as you've said there, I love that point. Even individual tutors working for an agency, they are themselves, if they are to go down the self-employed route, a micro business, a one-man, one-woman band. Really important things to think about there for both the individual tutor and the tutoring company leader. Of course, caveat to say, if you haven't thought about any of this as a tutoring company leader, now is certainly the time to think about that, and not to think that my business will be fine. I'm sure I put in the safeguards, a long time ago, and I'm sure I'm compliant. Go back and check, make sure that things are compliant, and of course, get in touch with someone like Steph at the Law Hound if you need to do so. What is the best way for someone to get in touch with you after this, Steph, if they want to?
The best way is probably by email, support@lawhound.co.uk. I'll make sure that you get all the links, etc. Start by having a look at the website. Start by having a look at the free information that we've got. We haven't got a webinar scheduled at the moment, but kind of have a look, get on the list for that, and you will be notified. We're always open to kind of dealing with questions. We've probably got something that you need to know that we've got the answer to because we've looked at it for somebody else. So, come forward and kind of get in contact, really.
And now a brief word from last week's guests, Crystal Weber and Tim Gascoigne, whose episode you can catch after this, and whose Level Up Teaching Summit is taking place on Friday the 2nd of December. Tickets you can grab at levelupteachingsummit.com.
It's always a pleasure to sit down and chat with Ludo, but this particular podcast was only enhanced because Tim joined us as well, and it was really a lot of fun to spark ideas off of both of them. I came away from the podcast thinking about the question, where is the industry headed? I presented the view that there is some constriction due to the fallout of the China market in ESL. And Tim countered that by saying there is still growth because the industry is coming on technologically, and there's so much more understanding and acceptance of online learning. And he's absolutely right. I think the important thing is to persevere, to upskill, and to build community in order to maintain one's position in this industry. And it's, very much only upward from here. So that was my main takeaway. My advice to future guests is that you are probably more articulate than you think. So best of luck. And thanks again, Ludo.
Hey, it's Tim Gascoigne from episode 139 on the Qualified Tutor Podcast. I was recently interviewed by Ludo and his team and had a fantastic time sharing all about online ESL teaching and also learning all about the services and products that Qualified Tutor provides. I really enjoyed the conversation that we got to have, and it's always really great to connect with colleagues in the industry. If you are someone that is approached to be a guest or you've got a story to share, don't hesitate to be on the Qualified Tutor podcast and share your story and connect with a wider audience.
Now, one final question before we wrap up here, Steph. And that question is, and given the last half an hour of conversation, one could perhaps predict what the answer to this question is going to be. But Steph, what is next for you? What's next for Steph Barber?
Okay, it's basically more of the same, but kind of moving possibly further away from the law, insofar as that I have always loved the business aspect, as has Sue. The law we see as kind of like a great foundation of what we do, but it's actually the business and helping people, which is the bit that we really enjoy. So we're looking at kind of programs and training and consultancy, which is going to help people to grow their business in the way that they want to and help them think about things that they can do that's perhaps kind of using their skills, their knowledge and expertise in a slightly different way. Perhaps, for example, alternatives to one-to-one, perhaps not as a, kind of, I'm never doing one-to-one tutoring, but ways in which that, financially, nobody's in the best place that they could be generally. Maybe kind of looking at ways that they can disseminate their knowledge that isn't kind of just for an hourly rate. It's maybe making a product or something that somebody is going to be picking up from students' point of view and can kind of say, right, that's a real aha moment because they have covered, for example, fractions. Goodness help them. And so I now understand something to do with fractions and kind of just really looking at it from the business point of view and understanding as well, I guess, that, compliance, you can look at it and it can be really difficult, but looking at things that actually it's a way of enhancing your business. So that's it, more of the same, more or less, but perhaps, as I say, moving slightly away from the law and more to kind of helping businesses.
Look at that. What a wonderful journey to be part of. As Steph mentioned just there, support at lawhound.co.uk or their website, lawhound.co.uk, is the next step for you guys to go to check out anything else about what we've talked about here. They also have a wonderful YouTube channel as well. Just type in Lawhound to YouTube so to catch that content in a slightly different format, if that's what you prefer. Thank you, Steph, so much for taking the time to take us through that. You are doing great work in the tutoring industry and very, very invaluable work in making tutoring company leaders feel safer and more comfortable. So that is, key work. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us. I hope you enjoyed a little bit talking about your background, your school days.
It was lovely, and thank you so much for having me. It really is. And yes, it has reminded me again about my school days and the fact that I got a lot of help that I really needed. So thank you so much to all the tutors and teachers out there, because I can honestly say I wouldn't be here today.
What a powerful statement. Well, that has been the 140th episode of the Qualified Tutor podcast. Next week, we'll be talking to Helen Dickman about business mentorship, community, helping each other through the power of collaboration. Many of you will know Helen already, so that should be teed up to be a lovely conversation as well. But one final thank you to you, Steph, and thank you all for tuning in to the Qualified Tutor podcast. It's a real pleasure to speak to you on this platform. See you all next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Qualified Tutor podcast. Your next step is to check out the Love Tutoring community, and in particular, Love Tutoring Community Connect, a new premium membership space which will serve all your subject-specific CPD needs alongside a friendly, professional community space that meets regularly. Visit qualifiedtutor.org/transformational-training to find out more about our CPD accredited Level 2 safeguarding and Ofqual recognised courses, the first of their kind in the tutoring industry. See you there.